The blood on Natalie Greene's hands would not wash away, no matter how hard she scrubbed them in the cold water of the horse trough behind the lumber mill in Georgetown, Colorado. And it took her a long moment to realize the blood was her own, seeping from the raw cracks and blisters that covered her palms like a second skin. The autumn of 1882 had turned colder than anyone expected, and the mountain winds that swept down from the peaks cut through her thin work dress like knives. But Foreman Decker would not let her stop for warmer clothes or bandages, or even a moment to catch her breath. Greene, get those boards stacked before sundown, or you will not see a single cent today. His voice cracked across the lumber yard like a whip, and Natalie flinched despite herself. She was 22 years old and had been working at the Riverside lumber mill for 3 months now, ever since her father had died in a mining accident up in Silver Plume and left her with nothing but debts and a reputation for being too proud to beg. The work was brutal, meant for men twice her size, but Foreman Decker had made it clear that if she wanted to eat, she would work the same hours and carry the same loads as any man on the crew. The only difference was that he paid her half. She wiped her hands on her dress, leaving dark smears that might have been blood or might have been the pitch from the pine boards, and bent to lift another heavy plank. Her back screamed in protest. She had been awake since before dawn, hauling lumber from the cutting stations to the sorting area, and the sun was already sinking toward the western peaks. Her stomach cramped with hunger. Breakfast had been a heel of stale bread, and lunch had been nothing at all because she had been too slow with the morning's work, and Decker had denied her the break. "You think you are special because you are a woman," Decker had said when she had asked for just 10 minutes to rest and eat the biscuit she had wrapped in cloth. "You want special treatment. Go work in a brothel. Here, you work like everyone else or you leave." But leaving meant starving, and Natalie knew that winter was coming fast to the Colorado mountains. She had nowhere else to go. Her father's house had been sold to pay his debts. She had no family left, no husband, no prospects. The mill was her only hope, and Foreman Decker knew it. He worked her harder than any of the men, gave her the worst tasks, and watched with cruel satisfaction as she struggled and strained and sometimes wept from sheer exhaustion when she thought no one was looking. The other workers avoided her, some out of embarrassment that they did not stand up for her, others because they feared Decker would turn his cruelty on them if they showed her any kindness. Only old Timothy, who ran the saw station, ever spoke to her with any warmth, and even he kept his distance when the foreman was near. Natalie hoisted the board onto her shoulder, feeling something pull painfully in her lower back, and staggered toward the stack. The wood was green and heavy, still weeping sap, and her hands slipped on the smooth surface. She caught herself before she dropped it, but just barely. Sweat ran down her face despite the cold, and her vision blurred at the edges. She had not been sleeping well. The boarding house where she rented a tiny room was loud and drafty, and she could never seem to get warm or get enough rest before the next day of backbreaking labor began again. "Faster, Greene. I have seen crippled mules move with more speed." Decker was standing on the platform outside the mill office, his thick arms crossed over his barrel chest, his face red from the whiskey he drank throughout the day. He was a big man, tall and broad, and he used his size to intimidate. Some of the women in town whispered that he had killed a man in Kansas before coming to Georgetown, but no one knew for certain. What everyone did know was that he had a mean streak wider than Clear Creek and no conscience to speak of. Natalie bit her lip hard enough to taste copper and forced her legs to move faster. The sun touched the top of the mountains, painting the snow-covered peaks gold and orange. In perhaps half an hour it would be dark. Her body felt like it was made of lead, but she kept going because she had no other choice. one foot in front of the other. Lift, carry, stack. Lift, carry, stack. The rhythm was all that kept her upright. She was reaching for another board when she heard the commotion at the front of the mill yard. Voices raised, not in anger but in surprise. She straightened slowly, pressing a hand to the small of her aching back, and turned to look. A man had ridden into the yard on a massive bay horse, and every worker had stopped what they were doing to stare. Natalie could see why. The rider was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed almost too broad to be real. His hair was dark brown and fell past his collar, tied back with a strip of leather. He wore buckskin pants and a heavy wool coat that could not quite hide the powerful build beneath. His face was weathered and tanned, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of dark stubble, and his eyes were a startling pale blue that seemed to take in everything at once. He sat in the saddle with the easy confidence of a man who had spent more time in the wilderness than in any town. "Can I help you?" Foreman Decker had come down from his platform, his voice loud and assertive, though Natalie noticed he did not get too close to the stranger. The big man swung down from his horse with fluid grace despite his size. Up close, he was even more imposing. His arms were roped with muscle, his hands large and calloused. Everything about him spoke of strength and competence. "Heard you might have milled timber for sale," the stranger said. His voice was deep and quiet, the kind of voice that did not need to be raised to be heard. "I am building a cabin up in the high country, need good boards, and someone in town said this was the place." "We have timber," Decker said. "Depends on what you need and whether you can pay." "I can pay." The stranger's pale eyes drifted across the yard, taking in the stacks of lumber, the workers who were trying to look busy while clearly listening. And then his gaze landed on Natalie. She saw something shift in his expression, a tightening around his eyes, though his face remained otherwise impassive. His eyes lingered on her bloody hands, her thin dress, the way she was swaying slightly on her feet. "That girl," he said, nodding toward her. "She all right?" Decker's face flushed darker. "She is fine. She works here, none of your concern. She looks about ready to collapse." "I said she is fine." Decker stepped between the stranger and Natalie, puffing his chest out in a display of dominance. "Now, you want to talk timber or you want to stand here asking fool questions about my workers?" The stranger's jaw tightened, and for a moment Natalie thought there might be violence. The air seemed to crackle with tension, but then the big man gave a slight nod. "Let us talk timber then." Natalie forced herself to turn back to the lumber pile, though her hands were shaking now and not just from exhaustion. She could feel the stranger's eyes on her back as Decker led him toward the office. Something about the way he had looked at her, with what might have been concern or even anger on her behalf, made her chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with physical pain. When was the last time anyone had looked at her like she mattered? She worked through the fading light, pushing her body past the point of endurance because she knew Decker would dock her pay if she did not finish. The stranger and the foreman were in the office for a long time, their voices muted by the wooden walls. When they finally emerged, it was nearly dark, and Natalie was stacking the last of the boards by the light of the lanterns that had been lit around the yard. "Greene, come here." Decker's voice made her jump. She set down the board she was holding and walked toward the office on unsteady legs. Up close, she could see that Decker was smiling, which was never a good sign. The stranger stood beside him, his face unreadable, though his eyes tracked her approach with an intensity that made her nervous. "This gentleman is Ryder Xavier," Decker said, still smiling that unpleasant smile. "He has bought a significant amount of timber from us, needs it delivered up to his property in the high country." Natalie nodded, not sure why this information concerned her. You are going to help him load his wagon tomorrow morning, Decker continued. Early, 5 o'clock. He will be back with his wagon, and you will get every board loaded and secured. Understood? Yes, sir, Natalie said quietly. It meant another day of brutal work, but at least it was work. At least she would eat. Good. Now get out of here. You look like death. Natalie did not need to be told twice. She collected her thin shawl from where she had left it on a nail by the mill entrance and started the long walk back toward town. The boarding house was a mile away, and every step was agony. Her feet felt like they were on fire, and her back throbbed with a deep, relentless pain that made her want to weep. She had made it perhaps halfway down the road when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She moved to the side, expecting whoever it was to pass by, but instead the horse slowed and then stopped. She looked up to find Ryder Xavier looking down at her from his saddle. You should not be walking alone in the dark, he said. I walk this road every night, Natalie replied, too tired to be afraid or even properly cautious. I will be fine. You look like you are about to fall over. I appreciate your concern, but I can manage. The words came out sharper than she intended, born of pride, and the bitter knowledge that accepting help often came with strings attached. Men did not offer kindness without expecting something in return. She had learned that lesson well in the month since her father died. Ryder Xavier studied her for a long moment, his pale eyes reflecting the starlight. I am not going to hurt you, he said finally, as if he could read her thoughts. But I am also not going to ride past and leave a woman to walk alone in the dark when I have a perfectly good horse. You can ride and I will walk, or you can ride and I will lead the horse, but either way I am not leaving you out here. There was something in his voice, a quiet certainty that made Natalie believe him, or maybe she was just too tired to argue anymore. Fine, she said. Thank you. He dismounted in one smooth motion and held out his hand to help her up. His palm was warm and rough with calluses, and his grip was gentle despite the obvious strength in his fingers. He lifted her into the saddle with such ease that she might have weighed nothing at all, and then he took the reins and began to walk, leading the horse down the dark road toward Georgetown. They did not speak for a while. Natalie clung to the saddle horn, grateful beyond words to be off her feet. The horse's gait was smooth and rocking, almost soothing, and she felt herself starting to relax for the first time all day. How long have you been working at the mill? Ryder asked finally, his voice quiet in the darkness. 3 months, Natalie said. Since my father died. I am sorry. Thank you. She paused, then added, there was not much choice. I needed work and the mill was hiring. That man, Decker, he treats you poorly. It was not a question, but Natalie answered anyway. He treats everyone poorly. I just happen to be an easier target than most. Because you are a woman. Because I am a woman with no family and no options, Natalie corrected. He knows I cannot afford to leave. Ryder was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was harder. No one should have to work like that. I saw your hands. I saw how you could barely stand. I am still standing, Natalie said, though even as she said it, she knew it was barely true. I will survive. Surviving is not the same as living. The simple truth of that statement hit her harder than she expected. For a moment, she could not speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. He was right, of course. She was not living. She was just enduring day after day until what? Until her body gave out. Until Decker pushed her too far and she collapsed and never got back up. What choice do I have? She asked finally, hating how small her voice sounded. There are always choices, Ryder said. Some are just harder to see than others. They reached the edge of town, and Natalie directed him to the boarding house, a tired 2-story building that leaned slightly to one side and smelled of boiled cabbage and mildew. Ryder helped her down from the horse, his hand steadying her when her legs nearly buckled. "Thank you for the ride," she said. "That was kind of you." "Will you be all right?" he asked, and there was genuine concern in his eyes. "I will be fine," Natalie lied. "I will see you tomorrow morning at the mill." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he just nodded and swung back into his saddle. Natalie watched him ride away, this strange mountain man with his quiet voice and careful eyes, and wondered why he had bothered to show her even this small kindness. In her experience, men like Foreman Decker were the rule, not the exception. Men who saw weakness and exploited it, who took what they wanted and cared nothing for the cost. But Ryder Xavier had looked at her like she was a person who mattered, not just a workhorse to be driven into the ground. That alone was enough to make her eyes sting with tears she was too tired to shed. She climbed the stairs to her tiny room, lit her one candle, and fell onto the narrow bed without even removing her boots. Sleep came almost instantly, heavy and dreamless, and when she woke to the sound of the boarding house bell ringing for the 4:30 risers, she felt like she had barely closed her eyes at all. The walk to the mill in the pre-dawn darkness was torture. Every muscle in her body ached, and her hands had stiffened overnight into painful claws. She unwrapped them from the strips of cloth she had used as makeshift bandages, and saw that several of the blisters had burst and were now oozing clear fluid. She washed them as best she could in the icy water from the pump behind the boarding house and wrapped them again, gritting her teeth against the pain. She reached the mill just as the sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Ryder Xavier was already there, waiting beside a large flatbed wagon hitched to a team of sturdy draft horses. He nodded when he saw her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Morning," he said. "Good morning," Natalie replied. She looked at the wagon and mentally calculated how many boards it would take to fill it. A lot. Her heart sank. Foreman Decker emerged from the office, already red-faced and smelling of whiskey. "Well, do not just stand there, Greene. Start loading, and make sure every board is perfect. No splits, no rot. Mr. Xavier is paying good money, and I will not have you embarrassing this mill with shoddy work." Natalie nodded and moved toward the nearest stack of lumber. She bent to lift a board, and white-hot pain lanced through her back. She gasped and nearly dropped it, but managed to hold on through sheer force of will. When she straightened, she found Ryder watching her, his jaw tight. "I can help load," he said to Decker. "You paid for delivery and loading," Decker said. "Greene will handle it. That is what she is here for." "She is injured. She is fine. Just lazy. Greene, move faster or I will dock your pay." Natalie gritted her teeth and carried the board to the wagon. It took all her strength to lift it high enough to slide it onto the bed. By the time she went back for the second board, she was already breathing hard. This was going to be a very long morning. She worked as fast as her body would allow, but it was not fast enough for Decker. He stood watching, shouting criticisms and insults, driving her to move quicker even as her muscles screamed in protest. Ryder helped despite Decker's objections, lifting boards with such ease that what took Natalie 3 trips took him 1. His presence made the work go faster, but it also made her acutely aware of her own weakness. She could feel his eyes on her every time she stumbled or had to stop to catch her breath. They had been working for perhaps 2 hours when it happened. Natalie was carrying a particularly long board, struggling with the unwieldy weight, when her foot caught on an uneven patch of ground. She fell hard, and the board fell with her, one end catching her across the shin with brutal force. She heard the crack more than felt it at first, and then the pain hit her like a lightning strike, so intense that she could not even scream. She just lay there in the dirt, gasping, her vision going white at the edges. "Natalie." Ryder was beside her in an instant, his hands gentle as he carefully moved the board off her leg. Decker was there too, but he was not concerned. He was angry. "Get up, Greene. Stop being dramatic. It is just a bruise." But Ryder was examining her leg, his face grim. "This is not a bruise. I think her leg is broken." "It is not broken," Decker snapped. "She is just trying to get out of work. Get up, Greene, or you are fired." Natalie tried to stand, tried to prove him wrong. But the moment she put weight on her leg, the pain was so overwhelming that everything went dark around the edges, and she felt herself falling again. Ryder caught her before she hit the ground, lifting her into his arms as easily as if she were a child. "She needs a doctor," he said, his voice flat and hard. "She needs to get back to work," Decker said. "Put her down." "No." The single word hung in the air like a challenge. Decker's face went from red to purple. "What did you just say to me?" "I said no." Ryder adjusted his hold on Natalie, cradling her against his broad chest. "She is hurt. She needs medical attention. I am taking her to the doctor, and you are not going to stop me. You have no right." "She is my worker. I say what happens to her. She is a human being, and she is injured because you worked her past the point of collapse." Ryder's voice was still quiet, but there was steel in it now, and something dangerous in his pale eyes. "I am taking her. If you have a problem with that, you can try to stop me." For a moment, Natalie thought Decker might actually try. She could feel the tension in Ryder's body, the coiled readiness of a man prepared for violence. But Decker must have seen something in Ryder's face that gave him pause, because he stepped back, his hands clenched into fists. "Fine, take her, but she is fired. You hear me, Greene? You are done here. Do not bother coming back." Natalie wanted to protest, wanted to beg for her job despite everything, because how would she survive without it? But the pain in her leg was too intense, and she was too dizzy and sick to form words. She let her head rest against Ryder's shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling the tears finally come, hot and bitter. Ryder carried her to his wagon and laid her carefully on the flatbed among the lumber. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and tucked it around her, then climbed up onto the driver's seat and took the reins. The wagon lurched into motion, and Natalie bit her lip against the pain as every bump and jostle sent fresh agony shooting through her leg. The doctor's office was on the main street of Georgetown, above the Mercantile. Ryder carried her up the narrow stairs, and his pounding on the door brought a middle-aged man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. "Dr. Harrison, I need your help. Her leg is broken." Dr. Harrison took one look at Natalie's ashen face and stood aside immediately. "Bring her in. Put her on the table there." The examination was a blur of pain. The doctor confirmed that the bone was indeed fractured, though thankfully not a compound break. He said it as gently as he could, but Natalie still nearly blacked out from the agony. When it was finally over, her leg was splinted and wrapped, and she was lying on the doctor's examining table, sweating and shaking. "She needs rest," Dr. Harrison said, speaking to Ryder as if Natalie were not there. "At least 6 weeks of it. No walking, no work. That bone needs time to heal properly, or she will have problems with that leg for the rest of her life." 6 weeks, Natalie whispered, and it sounded like a death sentence. 6 weeks without work meant 6 weeks without pay. How would she afford rent? How would she eat? She had a few dollars saved, but that would barely last a week, let alone 6. "Where are you staying?" Dr. Harrison asked her, his voice kind. "The boarding house on Pine Street," Natalie said. "But I do not know how I will pay for it now. I just lost my job." The doctor and Ryder exchanged a look that she could not quite read. "You need to be somewhere you can rest and recover properly," Dr. Harrison said carefully. "A boarding house is not ideal for that kind of care." "I do not have anywhere else," Natalie said, and she hated how helpless she sounded, how defeated. Ryder cleared his throat. "She can come with me." Both Natalie and the doctor looked at him in surprise. "What?" Natalie said. "I have a place up in the high country," Ryder said. "It is just a cabin, but it is clean and warm. I need help with various things anyway. Cooking, tending the garden, mending. Once your leg heals, you could help with that in exchange for room and board." "I do not understand," Natalie said slowly. "Why would you do that?" "Because you need help," Ryder said simply. "And I can offer it. No strings, no expectations. Just honest work for honest pay once you are healed. Until then, you rest and recover." It sounded too good to be true. In Natalie's experience, offers like this always came with hidden costs. But what choice did she have? She could go back to the boarding house and watch her savings drain away until she was on the street, or she could trust this strange mountain man with his quiet voice and careful eyes. "I do not even know you," she said. "No," Ryder agreed. "But maybe that is better than knowing people who treat you like Decker did." He had a point. What had knowing people gotten her? Her father's friends had disappeared the moment he died. The people in town looked at her with pity or contempt, but offered no real help. At least Ryder Xavier was honest about what he was offering. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you, I accept." Relief flickered across Ryder's face, so brief she almost missed it. "Good. Doctor, what does she need?" "Medicine, supplies." Dr. Harrison wrote out a list and instructions for care, which Ryder took with a serious nod. He paid the doctor's fee without blinking, and then he carried Natalie back down to his wagon. The lumber was still loaded in the back, so he made a nest of sorts with his coat, and an extra blanket he pulled from under the seat, arranging it so her leg was supported, and she could lie relatively comfortably. "I need to get my things from the boarding house," Natalie said as he climbed up to the driver's seat. "I will take you there." At the boarding house, Ryder paid her back rent and collected her few belongings, which fit in a single battered carpetbag. The landlady barely looked at Natalie as Ryder carried her back out, and Natalie realized with a strange detachment that no one in this town cared what happened to her. She could disappear into the mountains with a stranger, and not a single person would notice or worry. The thought should have been frightening, but instead it was almost liberating. She had spent 3 months in Georgetown trying to survive, trying to be respectable and hardworking, and all the things a woman was supposed to be, and what had it gotten her? A broken leg and a lost job and not a single friend to show for it. Maybe it was time to try something different. The ride into the high country took most of the day. The wagon followed rough roads that wound up into the mountains, through forests of pine and aspen, past cold streams that tumbled down over rocks. The air grew thinner and colder as they climbed, but the blanket kept Natalie warm, and the pain in her leg had subsided to a dull, throbbing ache thanks to the laudanum Dr. Harrison had provided. She dozed off and on, lulled by the rhythm of the wagon and the vast quiet of the wilderness. When she was awake, she watched Ryder's broad back as he drove. The way he handled the reins with easy competence, the way he seemed completely at home in this wild landscape. Once they passed a meadow where a small herd of elk grazed, and he stopped the wagon to let her watch them, his voice soft as he pointed out the big bull with his massive antlers. "I have never seen elk before," she admitted. "Only in pictures." "There is a lot to see up here," Ryder said. "If you are willing to look." Late in the afternoon, they rounded a bend and Ryder said, "There, that is home." Natalie raised herself up on her elbows to see. The cabin sat in a wide meadow surrounded by forest, with mountains rising up on all sides. It was larger than she had expected, built from solid logs with a stone chimney and a covered porch. There was a small barn behind it, and what looked like a chicken coop and a garden plot, though the garden was dormant now with the approach of winter. Smoke rose from the chimney, which surprised her until Ryder explained. "I asked my neighbor to come up and light the fire this morning, make sure the place was warm. He lives about 2 miles down the valley. Good man. You will meet him eventually." He drove the wagon right up to the cabin and then came around to lift her down. The interior of the cabin was simple but well made. One large room with a stone fireplace, a solid wood table and chairs, a rocking chair, shelves lined with books and supplies. There was a sleeping loft above, accessed by a ladder, and a separate small room off to one side that Ryder explained he had been using for storage. "I will clear out that room for you," he said, carrying her to the rocking chair and settling her in it carefully. "It has a proper bed frame. I just need to move some things and set it up. For tonight, you can have the loft and I will sleep down here." "I cannot take your bed," Natalie protested. "You have a broken leg. You are not climbing a ladder. I will be fine on the floor. I have slept in worse places." Before she could argue further, he was moving, unloading the wagon, stoking the fire, heating water for tea. He moved around the cabin with quiet efficiency, and Natalie found herself relaxing despite her situation. There was something reassuring about his presence, something solid and dependable. He made a simple dinner of beans and cornbread, apologizing for the plain fare, though to Natalie, it tasted like a feast after months of boarding house food. While she ate, he worked on clearing out the small room, carrying out boxes and tools, and setting up a sturdy bed frame with a mattress stuffed with fresh straw. He made it up with clean sheets and warm quilts, and by the time she finished eating, it looked more comfortable than anywhere she had slept in months. He carried her to the room and settled her on the bed, propping her leg up on a pillow. "Doctor said to keep it elevated. If you need anything in the night, just call out. I will hear you." "Thank you," Natalie said, "for everything. I know I already said it, but I mean it. You did not have to do any of this." Ryder looked at her for a long moment, his pale eyes thoughtful. "Yes, I did," he said finally. "I could not just walk away and leave you to suffer. I am not built that way." "Most men are," Natalie said quietly. "I am not most men." It was not a boast, just a statement of fact. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we will figure out a routine that works. You will heal, and when you are ready, there is plenty of work here if you still want it. But no pressure. First you heal." He left, closing the door softly behind him, and Natalie lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness night. Somewhere an owl hooted. The fire crackled in the main room, and beyond the cabin walls, the vast silence of the mountains pressed in, not threatening but strangely comforting, like a blanket thrown over the whole world. For the first time in 3 months, Natalie felt safe. She did not understand it, did not quite trust it, but she felt it nonetheless. And as she drifted off to sleep, she thought that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change for the better. The first week in the mountains passed in a haze of healing and adjustment. Natalie slept long hours, her body finally able to rest and recover from months of exhausting labor. Ryder was a quiet, considerate presence, bringing her meals, helping her to the chair by the fire so she would not feel trapped in the small room, making sure she had everything she needed. He asked for nothing in return, which confused her. She kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal what he really wanted from her, but it never happened. He was simply kind, in a matter-of-fact way that suggested kindness was his natural state rather than something he had to work at. She learned things about him in small increments. He had come to Colorado 3 years ago from Montana, looking for solitude and a place to build a life on his own terms. He had been a trapper, a guide, a ranch hand at various times. He knew the mountains like other men knew city streets. He could track animals, predict weather, find water in places that looked bone dry. He read books voraciously, everything from philosophy to adventure novels, and he had a quiet, dry sense of humor that caught her off guard sometimes and made her laugh. He was, she realized slowly, a good man. Not perfect, not some heroic ideal, but genuinely good in the ways that mattered. He treated her with respect, spoke to her like an equal, listened when she talked. It was such a stark contrast to Foreman Decker that sometimes she had to remind herself that this was real, that she was not dreaming. By the second week, she was feeling stronger, and she insisted on helping with small tasks. Ryder brought her vegetables to peel, sewing to mend, anything she could do while sitting. He seemed pleased by her insistence on contributing, though he never pushed her to do more than she felt capable of. "You are healing well," he said one evening as he helped her hobble to the table for dinner. The splint was still on her leg, but the pain had diminished to a manageable level. "Dr. Harrison would be pleased." "I feel almost human again," Natalie admitted. "It is strange, though. I went from working myself to death to doing almost nothing, and I do not quite know how to feel about it." "You are allowed to rest," Ryder said. "Your body needs it. There is no virtue in working yourself into an early grave." "Tell that to every foreman and factory owner in the country," Natalie said with a bitter laugh. "I would if I could," Ryder said seriously. "People are not machines. They need care and rest and kindness. Anyone who does not understand that is not fit to be in charge of others." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, and then Natalie asked the question that had been nagging at her. "Why do you live up here alone? You are not old, not unpleasant to be around. You could have a life in town, a family maybe." Ryder was quiet for a long moment, his fork paused halfway to his mouth. "I tried that once," he said finally. "The family part, I mean. I was engaged to a woman in Montana. Sarah was her name. We had plans, a future all mapped out. And then one day she told me she could not marry me because I was not ambitious enough. I did not want to own a big ranch or make a fortune. I just wanted a simple life, and that was not enough for her." "I am sorry," Natalie said softly. Ryder shrugged. "It was for the best, I think. Better to find out before the wedding than after. But it made me realize that I did not fit well in the world most people want to live in. So I came here, built this place, and found that I was happier alone than I ever was trying to be someone I was not." "Do you really think you are meant to be alone forever?" Natalie asked. "I do not know," Ryder said honestly. "Maybe, or maybe I just have not found the right person yet, someone who wants the same kind of life I do." Their eyes met across the table, and something passed between them, a spark of understanding or connection that made Natalie's heart beat faster. She looked away first, suddenly flustered, and focused on her plate. But that night, lying in her small room, she found herself thinking about Ryder Xavier in ways that had nothing to do with gratitude. She thought about the way his muscles moved under his shirt when he worked, the way his hair fell across his forehead when he was reading by the fire, the rare, beautiful smile that transformed his serious face when something genuinely amused him. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged, unpolished way that was far more appealing than conventional good looks. And more than that, he was kind. Truly, deeply kind. He had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go. He had asked nothing of her, expected nothing, just offered help because he could. How many men would do that? How many people, period? She told herself not to be foolish. He was offering her refuge, not romance. He was being a decent human being, nothing more. The last thing she should do was develop feelings for the man who had saved her from destitution. That was a complication neither of them needed. But feelings, she discovered, were not always subject to logic or good sense. By the third week, Natalie could hobble around the cabin with the help of a crutch Ryder had fashioned for her. She took over more of the household tasks, insisting that she could cook dinner while he worked on the various outdoor chores that needed doing before winter truly set in. He protested at first, worried she would hurt herself, but she was stubborn and eventually he relented. It felt good to be useful again, to contribute something tangible. And if she was honest with herself, she enjoyed taking care of him in small ways. Making sure there was hot coffee in the morning, preparing meals he enjoyed, keeping the cabin tidy. These were simple acts, but they felt significant somehow, like she was building something, though she was not quite sure what. The weather turned colder as October gave way to November. Snow dusted the high peaks, and frost sparkled on the meadow grass in the mornings. Ryder spent his days splitting wood, repairing the barn roof, making sure everything was secure for the harsh winter ahead. Natalie watched him work sometimes from the cabin window, admiring his strength and competence, the way he seemed completely in his element in this wild place. One evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Ryder said, "Your leg is healing well. Another few weeks and the splint can come off." Dr. Harrison said 6 weeks, and we are almost there. "I know," Natalie said. She had been thinking about this, about what happened next. "I suppose I should start thinking about what I will do after that. I cannot impose on your hospitality forever." Ryder looked up from the book he had been reading, his expression unreadable. "You are not imposing. I thought I made that clear. The offer stands. You can stay as long as you want, help with the work around here if you are willing." "You really mean that?" Natalie said slowly. "It is not just something you say to be polite." "I do not say things to be polite," Ryder said. "I mean it. You are good company, Natalie. I like having you here. And honestly, there is more work here than one person can easily manage. Having help would be valuable. I would pay you fair wages, of course, in addition to room and board." "You already are paying for my room and board," Natalie pointed out. "You have been for weeks now." "Consider it an investment," Ryder said with a slight smile. "In a future partnership, what do you say? Will you stay?" Natalie's heart was beating fast. Stay here in this beautiful place with this good man. It was everything she had not known she wanted. But there was a part of her that was afraid, that remembered all the times trust had been broken, all the ways kindness had turned out to be something else in disguise. "What if it does not work out?" she asked quietly. "What if we do not get along, or you decide you do not want me here anymore?" "Then we deal with it like adults," Ryder said. "We talk it through, and if it really is not working, we make other arrangements. But I do not think that will happen. I think we work well together. I think you are brave and strong and resourceful, and I would be lucky to have you as a partner in running this place." Partner. The word resonated in her chest. Not servant, not employee, but partner. "All right," she said. "Yes, I will stay. Thank you, Ryder, for everything." "You do not need to keep thanking me," he said gently. "We are helping each other. That is what partners do." That night, Natalie lay awake for a long time, her mind spinning. She had a home now, a real home, not just a rented room, but a place where she belonged. And she had Ryder, who saw her not as a burden or a victim, but as someone capable and valuable. It was more than she had dared to hope for. But there was something else, too, something that grew stronger every day she spent in his presence. She was falling for him, she realized. Slowly, steadily, inevitably. The way he moved, the way he spoke, the quiet strength and kindness that radiated from him like heat from the fire. She was falling, and she did not know how to stop it, or even if she wanted to. The question was, did he feel anything similar? Or was she alone in this, her feelings unreturned? She did not know, and she was afraid to find out. December came with the first real snowfall, thick and heavy, blanketing the meadow and weighing down the pine branches. Natalie's leg had healed enough that Dr. Harrison, who had made the long trip up to check on her, declared the splint could come off. The bone had set well, though the leg was weak from weeks of disuse. She would need to exercise it carefully, build back the muscle and strength. Ryder was patient as she relearned to walk without the crutch, catching her when she stumbled, encouraging her when she got frustrated. They fell into an easy routine. She handled the indoor work, the cooking and cleaning and mending, while he managed the animals and the outdoor chores. They worked side by side on projects that required two sets of hands, like rearranging the storage room or repairing harness leather. And in the evenings, they sat by the fire, reading or talking, the silence between them comfortable and companionable. Natalie had never felt so content. The work was hard, but it was satisfying in a way mill work had never been. She was building something here, creating a life. And every day she fell a little more in love with the man who had made it all possible. She tried to hide it, tried to keep her feelings to herself. But she caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noting the way the firelight played across his features, the way his hands moved with such sureness and skill. She found excuses to be near him, to brush against his arm when they worked together, to feel the warmth of his body. And sometimes she thought she caught him watching her too, his pale eyes soft with something that might have been affection or even desire. But he never said anything, never crossed the invisible line between partnership and something more. Christmas came, and Natalie made a special dinner, using up their precious stores of dried fruit to make a pie. Ryder went out into the forest and came back with a small pine tree, which they decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Natalie cut from old newspapers. It was simple, nothing like the grand Christmases of her childhood before her father lost everything, but it was perfect. "I have something for you," Ryder said that evening after they had finished eating. He disappeared into the loft and came back down with a package wrapped in brown paper. Natalie's hands shook slightly as she unwrapped it. Inside was a book, a beautiful leather-bound volume of poetry. She opened it and saw that he had written an inscription on the first page in his neat, careful handwriting. "For Natalie, who taught me that solitude and loneliness are not the same thing, thank you for making this house a home. Ryder." She looked up at him, her eyes stinging with tears. "Ryder, this is beautiful, thank you." "I did not know what to get you," he said, looking almost shy. "But I noticed you looking at my books, and I thought maybe you would like one of your own." "I love it," Natalie said. She stood up, and before she could think better of it, she crossed the small space between them and hugged him, her arms going around his solid, warm body. He stiffened for just a moment, surprised, and then his arms came around her in return, holding her gently. She could feel the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, feel the strength of him surrounding her. It felt like coming home. When she pulled back, she saw something in his eyes, something intense and vulnerable that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. She wanted him to, wanted it with an intensity that surprised her, but he just smiled, soft and sad, and said, "Merry Christmas, Natalie." "Merry Christmas, Ryder." The moment passed, and they went back to their respective spaces, but something had shifted. The air between them felt charged now, full of unspoken possibilities. That night, Natalie lay in bed, clutching the book to her chest, and admitted to herself what she had been trying to deny for weeks. She was in love with Ryder Xavier. Completely, hopelessly in love. And she had no idea what to do about it. January brought bitter cold and heavy snows that sometimes trapped them in the cabin for days at a time. But Natalie did not mind. She was warm and safe and happy in a way she had never been before. She and Ryder talked for hours during those snowbound days, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes and fears, their views on everything from politics to philosophy, to whether the new century, still 18 years away, would bring progress or disaster. She learned that he had grown up on a farm in Ohio, the youngest of 5 children. He had gone west as a young man seeking adventure and found it in the wilds of Montana and Wyoming. He had worked as a scout for a wagon train once, had lived with a Shoshone tribe for a winter and learned their language, had nearly died of pneumonia in a blizzard and been saved by a prospector who shared his claim shack until the weather cleared. He was educated beyond what his rough exterior suggested, having learned to read from his mother, a schoolteacher, and continuing his education on his own through every book he could get his hands on. He had opinions on literature and art, could quote Shakespeare and Emerson from memory, and had a philosophical bent that surprised and delighted her. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Denver, where her father had run a successful import business until bad investments and worse, luck had destroyed everything. She told him about her mother, who had died when Natalie was 12, and the string of housekeepers and tutors her father had hired to raise her. She told him about the slow, painful decline after they lost everything, the move to Georgetown, her father's desperate attempt to make a new start in the mining industry that had ended with his death. "I was angry at him for a long time," she admitted one snowy afternoon as they worked together to card wool from Ryder's small flock of sheep. "Angry that he gambled away our security, that he made bad choices that left me with nothing. But I have realized lately that he was just doing the best he could. We all are." "That is a generous way to look at it," Ryder said. "Not everyone could forgive like that." "Holding on to anger was not helping me," Natalie said. "It was just making me bitter, and I do not want to be bitter. I want to be happy." "Are you?" Ryder asked quietly. "Happy, I mean, here." Natalie looked up from the wool in her hands and met his eyes. "Yes," she said honestly. "I am happier here than I have been in years, maybe ever. You have given me that, Ryder, this place, this life. I will never be able to thank you enough." Something flickered in his expression, something raw and vulnerable. "Natalie, I need to tell you something." Her heart started pounding. "What is it?" He set down the wool he was working with and turned to face her fully. "These past few months, having you here, it has changed things for me. Changed me, maybe. I thought I wanted to be alone, that I was better off that way. But now I cannot imagine this place without you in it. I cannot imagine my life without you." Natalie's breath caught. "Ryder." "I know I should not say this," he continued, the words coming faster now as if he had been holding them back for too long. "I know the arrangement we have is professional, a partnership, and I do not want to make you uncomfortable or feel like you have to leave. But I have to be honest with you. I care about you, Natalie, more than I should, more than is probably wise, and if you do not feel the same way, I will never mention it again. We can go back to how things were, and I will respect that, but I had to tell you, I could not keep it inside anymore." For a moment, Natalie could not speak. Joy and relief and disbelief were all tangled up inside her, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. And then she was moving, crossing the space between them, taking his face in her hands. "You foolish man," she said, her voice shaking. "I have been in love with you for months. I just did not think you felt the same way." The look of pure, stunned happiness on his face was something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. And then he was kissing her, his arms coming around her, pulling her close. His lips were warm and gentle at first, questioning, and when she kissed him back with all the pent-up longing of the past months, he made a sound low in his throat and deepened the kiss, his hands sliding into her hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that for so long," he said, his voice rough. "Why did you wait?" Natalie asked. "I did not want you to feel obligated," he said. "You were here because you had nowhere else to go. I did not want you to think you had to return my feelings out of gratitude or fear of losing your place here." "You idiot," Natalie said, but there was no heat in it, only affection. "I am here because I want to be, because I choose to be, and I choose you, Ryder Xavier. I love you." "I love you too," he said, and kissed her again. They spent the rest of that snowy afternoon wrapped in each other's arms, talking and kissing and making plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright and full of possibility. They talked about marriage, about the practical realities of running the homestead together as husband and wife, about the life they could build in this wild, beautiful place. "I do not have much to offer you," Ryder said at one point, his hand tangled in her hair as she rested her head on his chest. "Not wealth or society or any of the things women are supposed to want." "I do not want those things," Natalie said. "I want this. I want you. I want a life where we work together and build something real and good. That is worth more than all the wealth in the world." "You are sure?" he asked. "Because once we do this, once we marry, you are stuck with me. I am not an easy man, Natalie. I am set in my ways, stubborn, and I spend too much time in my own head." "I am stubborn too," Natalie said, "and probably too independent for my own good, but I think that means we are well matched, do you not?" "I think you might be right," Ryder said, and the smile on his face was so open and joyous that it made her heart ache with love. They were married in late February, when the worst of the winter had passed, but the mountains were still deep in snow. Ryder's neighbor, Samuel, who turned out to be a justice of the peace in addition to a rancher, performed the ceremony in the cabin, with Samuel's wife Martha as their witness. It was simple and quick, but it felt more real and meaningful than any elaborate church wedding could have been. Natalie wore a dress that Martha had helped her make from fabric Ryder had bought on a supply trip to Georgetown. It was dark blue, practical but with delicate lace at the collar that made her feel beautiful. Ryder wore his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly tied back, and the look in his eyes when he saw her made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "I, Ryder Xavier, take you, Natalie Greene, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he said, his deep voice steady and sure. "I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever comes, in good times and bad, in plenty and in want, for the rest of my life. I, Natalie Greene, take you, Ryder Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband," Natalie said, her voice only slightly shaky with emotion. "I promise to love you, support you, and be your partner in all things, in joy and sorrow, in health and sickness, for the rest of my life." When Samuel pronounced them man and wife, Ryder kissed her with such tenderness that tears spilled down her cheeks. This was real. This was forever. And she had never wanted anything more. The rest of that day and night passed in a haze of happiness. Samuel and Martha stayed for dinner, a feast that Natalie and Martha had prepared together. There was laughter and good conversation and genuine warmth, and Natalie realized that these people, though she had known them only a short time, were her friends. Her family, even. When Samuel and Martha finally left, the cabin fell quiet. Ryder banked the fire while Natalie changed into her nightgown in their room. Their room now, not just hers. She was nervous, she realized. Not afraid, but uncertain. She had never been with a man before, and while she trusted Ryder completely, she did not quite know what to expect. When he came into the room, he must have seen something in her face because he crossed to her and took her hands in his. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said gently. "I can sleep in the loft if you prefer. There is no rush." "No," Natalie said quickly. I want to be with you. I am just nervous, I think. I have never done this before." "Neither have I," Ryder admitted, and the surprise must have shown on her face because he gave a slight, self-deprecating smile. "I told you I was engaged before, but we never. Sarah wanted to wait until we were married, and then we were not getting married anymore. And after that, I was up here alone. So this is new for me too." Somehow, knowing that they were both inexperienced made Natalie feel better. They would figure this out together, just like they had figured out everything else. She reached up and cupped his face, drawing him down for a kiss. They took their time, learning each other, exploring with gentle hands and whispered words. Ryder was patient and careful, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted every step they took. And when they finally came together, it was tender and sweet and perfect, a physical expression of the love they had already declared in words. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms, Natalie felt a peace and contentment so deep, it seemed to fill every part of her. This was what life was supposed to be, she thought. Not the desperate scramble for survival, not the brutal work and cruelty of people like Foreman. This. Love and partnership and building something good together. "Are you all right?" Ryder asked, his hand stroking her hair. "I am perfect," Natalie said. "I am happy. I did not think I could ever be this happy." "Neither did I," Ryder said. "You have given me something I did not even know I was missing, Natalie. Thank you, she whispered back. "For saving me, for seeing me when no one else did, for loving me." "Always," he promised, and she believed him. The rest of that winter passed in a glow of contentment. They worked together during the days, managing the homestead, caring for the animals, planning for the spring planting. And at night, they retreated to their room and lost themselves in each other, learning and exploring, growing closer with every passing day. Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. The snow melted in rushing streams, the meadow turned green, and wildflowers burst into bloom across the hillsides. Natalie planted a large garden, expanding the plot Ryder had started, and they acquired more chickens and 2 goats for milk. The work was constant, but it was good work, meaningful work, and Natalie threw herself into it with joy. She was stronger now than she had ever been, her body lean and capable from the physical labor. Her hands were calloused, but they were her own calluses, earned in work that mattered to her, not scars from abuse and exploitation. She could split wood, mend fences, help Ryder with the heavier tasks when he needed an extra pair of hands. And she was proud of what she could do, proud of the life they were building. In May, Samuel and Martha invited them down to their ranch for dinner and to meet some of the other families in the area. It was the first time Natalie had really socialized since leaving Georgetown, and she was surprised by how warm and welcoming everyone was. These mountain people, she discovered, valued hard work and honesty over social standing or wealth. No one cared that she had been a mill worker, that her father had died in debt, that she had married a mountain man with no fortune to his name. They cared that she was kind, that she pulled her weight, that she and Ryder were good neighbors. "You are happy," Martha said to her as they washed dishes together after the meal while the men talked outside. "It shows in your face. You glow with it." "I am happy," Natalie said. "Happier than I ever thought I could be. Ryder is a good man." "He is," Martha agreed. "We were all surprised when he showed up with you last fall. We had all figured Ryder was going to be a bachelor forever. But it is clear he loves you and you love him. That is a rare thing to find that kind of partnership." "I know how lucky I am," Natalie said softly. "Luck has nothing to do with it," Martha said. "You are both choosing to work at it every day. That is what makes a good marriage, the choosing." As summer arrived, Natalie realized she had not thought about Georgetown or the lumber mill or Foreman Decker in months. That part of her life felt like a bad dream, distant and unreal. Her life now was here, in these mountains, with Ryder, and it was more than she had ever dared to hope for. One warm evening in late June, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the peaks, Natalie said, "I have been thinking." "About what?" Ryder asked, his arm around her shoulders. "About the future, about children." She felt him stiffen slightly, and she looked up at him. "Do you want children?" she asked. "I do," he said slowly. "If you do, I had not wanted to bring it up in case you were not ready." "I think I am ready," Natalie said. "I want to have a family with you, Ryder. I want to fill this cabin with love and laughter and life." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. "Then that is what we will do," he said. "Whenever it happens, we will be ready." As it turned out, it happened sooner than they expected. By late summer, Natalie was certain she was pregnant, and a visit from Dr. Harrison, who was making his rounds through the mountain communities, confirmed it. She would have a baby in early spring. Ryder was overjoyed, his excitement and nervousness endearing. He became even more protective than before, insisting she not lift anything heavy, worrying over every little thing. Natalie found it amusing and touching in equal measure. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him when he tried to forbid her from helping him repair the barn roof. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know," Ryder said, "but you are my wife and this is my child and I am going to worry. You will just have to accept that." "I suppose I can live with that," Natalie said, kissing him. "As long as you accept that I am still going to do my share of the work." They compromised, with Natalie doing somewhat lighter tasks as her pregnancy progressed, and Ryder taking on extra to make up the difference. The months passed, autumn turning to winter once again, and Natalie grew round with their child. She had never felt more beautiful or more loved than she did under Ryder's adoring gaze. The baby came in March, during a late spring snowstorm that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. Martha had come to stay with them a week before, sensing the baby would come soon, and her experienced presence was a blessing. The labor was long and hard, but with Ryder holding her hand and Martha coaching her through it, Natalie brought a healthy baby boy into the world just as the sun rose on the 3rd day of the storm. They named him Robert, after Natalie's father, and called him Robbie. He had Ryder's blue eyes and Natalie's dark hair, and from the moment he was born, he owned their hearts completely. Ryder was a natural father, patient and gentle with his son, singing to him in his deep voice, carrying him everywhere in a sling Martha had made. Watching her strong, capable husband cradling their tiny baby made Natalie fall in love with him all over again. The years that followed were full and rich. They added to their homestead, building a larger barn and expanding the house with an additional room for Robbie. When Robbie was 2, Natalie gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, and 3 years after that, another son they called James. The cabin rang with the sounds of children laughing, playing, learning to be part of the life their parents had built. Ryder taught his children about the mountains, about the plants and animals, about respecting the land and living in harmony with it. Natalie taught them to read and write, sharing her love of books and learning. Together, they raised their children to be strong, kind, and capable, to work hard but also to appreciate beauty and joy. The homestead prospered. They sold timber and wool, smoked meat and preserved vegetables, and slowly built up a modest savings. They never became wealthy, but they always had enough. More importantly, they had each other and the family they had created together. Natalie sometimes thought back to that terrible autumn day when she had stood in the lumber yard with bloody hands and a broken spirit. certain she had no future worth living. If someone had told her then that within a year she would be married to a man she loved beyond measure, building a life of purpose and joy, she would never have believed it. But life had a way of surprising you, she had learned. Sometimes, when you had lost everything, you found something better than you ever could have imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder took her up into the high meadows above their homestead, to a place where wildflowers grew thick and the view stretched for miles. They left the children with Samuel and Martha for the afternoon, a rare moment of time alone together. "You remember when I first brought you here?" Ryder asked as they sat together on a flat rock, looking out at the mountains. "You were hurt and scared and had every reason not to trust me." "I remember," Natalie said. "You were this serious, quiet man who insisted on helping me even though you did not know me at all. I thought you must be crazy or have ulterior motives." "Did I?" he asked, a teasing note in his voice. "If you did, they were the best kind of ulterior motives," Natalie said. "You wanted to help someone who needed it. You saw me as a person worth saving. That changed everything." "You changed everything for me too," Ryder said. "I thought I knew what I wanted. Solitude, independence, a life on my own terms. And then you came along and showed me that what I really wanted was partnership. Someone to share the work and the joy, someone to build a life with." "We have built a good life," Natalie said softly. "The best life." "The best life," Ryder agreed. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Natalie Xavier. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you until the day I die." "I love you too, Ryder. Always." They sat there for a long time, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances and built something beautiful together. Below them, the homestead nestled in its valley, smoke rising from the chimney, their children safe and happy with friends. Around them, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, witnessing their love, their commitment, their joy. It was not the life Natalie had been born to or the life she had once imagined for herself. It was better. It was real and hard and full of love, and she would not trade a single moment of it for anything in the world. As the sun began to sink toward the western peaks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, Ryder stood and helped Natalie to her feet. Hand in hand, they made their way back down the mountain toward home, toward their children, toward the life they had chosen and created together. And as they walked, Natalie thought about the young woman she had been, broken and desperate and alone. She wished she could reach back through time and tell that girl that everything was going to be all right, that the cruelty of Foreman would not define her, that a mountain man with kind eyes and gentle hands would offer her refuge and partnership and love beyond measure. But maybe she did not need to reach back. Maybe living this life, this beautiful, imperfect, joyful life, was message enough. A testament to the power of kindness, the strength of love, and the truth that even in our darkest moments, hope remains. They reached the cabin just as full darkness fell, and the lamplight spilling from the windows was the most welcoming sight in the world. Inside, their children would be waiting, eager to tell them about their day, to be tucked into bed with stories and kisses. And later, she and Ryder would sit by the fire as they did every night, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest, and they would talk about tomorrow and next week and next year, making plans, dreaming dreams, grateful for every moment they had together. It was a simple life, perhaps, by some standards, but it was theirs, built on honesty and hard work and love. And in the end, Natalie thought, that was everything that truly mattered. The seasons turned, years flowed into decades, and the love between Natalie and Ryder only deepened. They weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, faced challenges and losses, celebrated victories and joys. Their children grew up strong and capable, eventually leaving to make their own lives while always carrying with them the lessons their parents had taught about love, work, and the value of partnership. And through it all, Ryder and Natalie stood together, partners in the truest sense of the word. The mountain man who had offered refuge to a desperate woman, and the woman who had taught him that love was worth the risk of opening his heart. Together, they had built not just a homestead but a legacy of kindness, strength, and enduring love. When they were old, with grandchildren running through the meadow and great-grandchildren bouncing on their knees, Natalie would sometimes catch Ryder's eye across the room and smile. And he would smile back, that rare, beautiful smile that was reserved just for her. And she would remember that autumn day in Georgetown when a stranger on a bay horse had looked at her with concern in his pale blue eyes and changed her life forever. She had been worked too hard by a cruel foreman, broken in body and spirit, with nowhere to turn and no hope for the future. And Ryder Xavier had offered her refuge, honest partnership, and a love that lasted a lifetime. It was, she thought, the greatest gift anyone had ever given her. And she had spent every day since trying to give him the same in return. That was the story she told their grandchildren when they asked how she and Grandpa Ryder had met. A story of hardship and kindness, of rescue and love, of two people who found each other when they needed it most and built a life together in the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains. And if the story made the children's eyes go wide with wonder, and if it made the adults in the room reach for their partner's hands, well, that was as it should be. Because it was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living, in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. To love and be loved in return. To build something good and lasting with another person. To face the world together, whatever it might bring, with courage and hope, and the unshakable certainty that you were not alone. Natalie Greene, who became Natalie Xavier, who became the heart of a family and the builder of a legacy, had found all of that and more in the arms of a mountain man with kind eyes and gentle hands. And she lived the rest of her life grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy, knowing that she had been blessed beyond measure. The story of her life was not one of easy comfort or wealth or social standing. It was a story of hard work and sacrifice, of challenges overcome and obstacles conquered. But it was also a story of love, deep and true and lasting, the kind of love that transforms lives and echoes through generations. And in the end, that made all the difference.